And I will now invite our next speakers, April Tucker and Meaghan Westlund, to join us. Very briefly, I know we circulated the program and the bios, but April Tucker is the Indigenous Resource Liaison at Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council. And Meaghan Westlund is a team leader for outreach services at the Unison Alberta Elder Abuse Shelter. And they're going to be doing a joint presentation called Caring Together, Enhancing Coordinated Community Response Models for Older Adults Living with Dementia and Experiencing Harm. I will invite both of you are on camera. Beautiful. I'm going to go off. And Ryan, if you can share the presentation on the screen, it would be wonderful.
I was just going to say, did you want me to do that still, April?
I'm gonna see if mine works here. So
Okay.
I'm just gonna start before we actually share the screen. I have to take a breath. I just got bad news this morning. Whew, okay. So an elder who I hold close to me passed away this morning. So it's just a little bit of a soothing sort of topic. So I'm just going to honor her before we start. So I want to acknowledge the passing of an elder, Miss Florence Large, who I hold close to my heart. Her journey to the spirit world has begun just moments ago. I will carry her today in this work that we do on elder abuse. And it is a reminder that the sacred responsibility we hold to honor, protect, and uplift our elders, both those here with us and those who have gone ahead. So I'm so sorry. This just came in as we were logging in. So, so I want to speak to that. Florence was an elder in my life who played an important role in not just my life, but the clients that I'd worked with in the past, with the young people. She shared a lot of her historic experiences as an Indigenous elder, experiencing residential schools, the 60s scoop, as well as MMIW. She had a sister very close to her at a very young age who was involved in an unfortunate situation when she was quite young. So these are the stories that Florence was able to share with us. And I think I just wanted to really honor that because of the topic today on elder abuse and just making sure that we acknowledge our elders and we're respecting them and holding their stories very close to our hearts. Whew, that was hard. So I'm going to share my screen. So I just hope you guys can bear with me throughout the presentation. If something comes up, that might be a little bit of a trigger just because of the timing. So thank you. Can you see that?
We can see your screen.
Okay.
If there's any chance you can make it a little bit bigger for everyone, that'd be great. If not, that's totally fine. You might be able to go into a presenter view at the bottom of your screen. Yeah, perfect. Beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, let me just get back here. Okay. So thank you guys for letting me share that moment with you. So today, Meaghan and I are here together to talk about the elders or older adults living in both urban, Indigenous, and rural communities on elder abuse and dementia. So I just want to introduce myself. I'm April Tucker. I am the Indigenous Liaison with the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council. I have been with AAC, our short abbreviation, since February 2024. I started with the council as the first staff member that was hired on. AAC has been around for 20 years, but as a council, not so much as an agency. So they've worked together for 20 years as a council with board members, increasing awareness on elder abuse throughout the communities. So some of the trainings that have been introduced in the communities is taking action against elder abuse, which my colleague Liz does the training for. So she is through all of Alberta, province-wide. She does this training both online and in person. And then as well as my colleague Jennifer does the taking or the It's Not Right, neighbors, friends, and family training. And for ourselves as staff, we also do that presentation to community members, and I've been able to do that too with some of the communities on the nations that I've worked with. But Jennifer does the direct training for that. And so AAC is also a part of the Core Alberta, and we work together with them throughout the year to make sure that we have the toolkit up to date for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. So lots of collaboration within the agency for AAC. And then for myself, I am the Indigenous Liaison, so I work mostly directly with the nations south of Edmonton, just getting the awareness out there, working with case managers on the nations, as well as leadership and service providers to ensure that hubs, CCRs are coordinated and put together for nation members, for the elders, as well as family members who are part of this growing and holistic sort of approach in a more traditional way, as opposed to how urban is. And the system is very different with rural as well. So we will get into more of that as we move forward. And so we also provide the Staying Safe handbook, and you can utilize that online, or also you can order them for the physical copies. The nice thing about these handbooks is it can be read to you too. So for some of our elders or older adults who might have some challenges with reading or understanding what it's saying, it will reiterate the handbook to them as well. And there's lots of information in there. And if you have questions about that, you're welcome to ask later on, or you can send us an email. So I am going to pass this on to Meaghan. She is going to just introduce herself and what it is that she does, and then we'll go forward with the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, April. So hello, good morning. My name is Meaghan Westlund. I'm the team leader for outreach services at the Unison Alberta Elder Abuse Shelter. Just a note, a lot of people don't actually know that elder abuse shelters are present in the country. Unfortunately, we don't have enough of them. Of course, there's 2 in Alberta and 1 is in Calgary, and that is the one that I work out of. We support older adults 55 and up that are actively fleeing abuse. And while in shelter, the clients actually have access to personal caseworkers and support workers who can help them navigate housing, income support, referrals, or anything they might need to be successful before they enter the community. And then outreach services kind of takes over from there. So we're fortunate enough to be able to provide 1-year post-discharge services to the people that are leaving the shelter, whether they go into private housing or seniors housing. We can support them with accessing mental health supports, referrals for furniture and household goods, because as everybody knows that occasionally when you're leaving an abusive situation, you're unable to pack a bag or take any of your personal belongings. So we support with all of those things. And then, of course, the biggest thing with costs and all of that, access to nutrition, so food bank and things like that. While in outreach services, we also work within the community. So we raise awareness about elder abuse and work with agencies to see where that support might be needed. And my connection to AAC actually is that I'm a caseworker for them, and I'm the Calgary caseworker. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but AAC itself has caseworkers working around Alberta in rural areas, urban areas, just to make sure that we have that support across the province. And so, you know, we do that case management piece, and we do the presentations and the community awareness. And we also have the coordinated community response, which is sort of what this presentation really is about, a CCR for short. And the one in Calgary is called CAC, so Calgary Elder Abuse Awareness Collective. And so we have, you know, a lot of senior serving agencies on our network, and we work to provide support where needed. It's not necessarily all about elder abuse, but it is about seniors itself, and making sure that we're supporting wherever we can. So what's really interesting about our CCR actually is that it's been around for years, but it was always really quite small. And, you know, I took over the role as co-chair, and I myself co-chair with Karya. And we really saw a need for expanding and really seeing where we can reach as far as we can for all of the Calgary agencies and networks that provide senior services and care to seniors or have senior clients. And so this can include Karya. We have Jewish Family Services on our network. We also partner with Calgary Police Services. You know, for those who are not in Calgary, a lot of immigration services and things like that. And then we also partner with Alzheimer's Calgary. And so that's really also where this presentation is going, is that when we look at elder abuse and dementia and memory care, it's really important to have these extra networks on our table, and on making sure that we're, you know, coordinating our response throughout our city, our community, to make sure that older people are really supported in any stage of their life. So I'll send it off to April here.
So the question is, why is this conversation important? So violence against older adults is rising, and particularly in the forms that are hidden, such as financial abuse, neglect, emotional manipulation, and coercive control, but not limited to that. Older adults living with dementia or cognitive impairment are at greater risk due to memory loss, communication challenges, and dependency on others. This is a call to action. We must build safer, more respectful, and inclusive systems that recognize the dignity, the rights, and lived experiences of aging. So what we don't see is that the elder isn't always loud, that the abuse isn't always loud or visible, and it can show up in quiet, controlling ways, such as withholding money or isolating the elders from their families or pressuring them into silence. For elders living with dementia, the risk increases because they struggle to communicate. They might not feel safe talking about what they're experiencing, or they're afraid of the people that, you know, who their caregivers are, or the people who are harming them. And they're relying completely on others if they're experiencing some of those memory challenges. So we need systems that not only respond, but truly honor the dignity and the rights and stories of our aging community members. This issue doesn't only affect our elders and our older adults, but it affects us as a community. It affects the family dynamics and anybody who is close to that elder. So what is the coordinated community response? So short form is their CCRs. So they're a collective of service providers. A lot of the time in our urban settings, it's a lot of service providers. So that could be anything from, as Meaghan had mentioned, the Alzheimer's Society. It could be addictions. If the elder is experiencing struggles with addiction, it can mean in-home care support, shelter support. We have case managers that support them through all of these connections. And it ensures a consistent, coordinated approach. So like Meaghan had mentioned, as a case manager, they're collaborating with all the sort of services that are within the city, and they come together to support the elder on whatever the issue is. If it's that they're being harmed, and there's financial abuse, there's physical abuse, isolation, it's ensuring that they're connected to those programs and those providers so that they can thrive in these challenges that they're facing. Strong community connections help build trust and improve how we share information and respond to these unique needs of the individuals. So for CCRs, in urban settings, oftentimes there are challenges because when you're in an urban setting, there is not those resources. We don't have Meaghan, we don't have the shelter out there, we don't have mental health supports or health services in those rural communities. So oftentimes it will be a collaboration of the people who know that elder or who are close to those elders, coming together to build that bond to support the elder who is experiencing harm or who is facing those dementia challenges. And as far as our Indigenous communities go, some of the nations do have a lot of those supports and services that are necessary, but not all of them do. Some of them are quite small, so they have to go outside of their own nations to gain those supports. Some of those supports might be the wellness centers, as mentioned again, addiction centers on the reserves, healthcare, in-home support. RCMP is involved. On some of the nations, they have their own peacemakers and bylaw officers. So those can be also part of the coordinated community response team. But as far as our Indigenous communities go, we don't typically call them CCRs. They're actually hubs. So that's a little bit of a difference between the Indigenous communities and the urban communities, is that a lot of them have considered them as hubs. Children's services is also involved because we have a lot of times kinship. So grandmothers, grandfathers, aunties and uncles are taking care of some of the children that are part of family members. So they are also involved in these hubs when it comes to these collaborations and conversations on how to support the elder. And then is for oftentimes with our Indigenous hubs as well, we involve natural supports. So when we're talking about how that looks, we're involving, family members of the elder, friends of the elders in the community who have concerns, who want to be a part of this collaboration to ensure the safety of their elder. And then on top of that, we also try to support the person causing harm. So in Indigenous communities, maybe not all, but a lot of the experiences that I've had with my work and my own personal experiences with my family, everybody comes together. So if somebody is struggling, it's just holding accountability to that individual as well. So it's also supporting the person who might be causing harm. Our elders are not going to just, leave their loved ones out there without the supports as well. They're going to more likely be able to open up and gain that trust if you're willing to support that person that they love as well. And then they may not see it as that. Our elders may not see that, that they're being harmed. They might just see it as that's just the family dynamics. We know with intergenerational trauma and the ripple effects, there's PTSD. So the way people react can be an indication of what the history looks like. So some of the key purposes of our CCRs are prevention, so education, awareness, and protection. So that's what the council has been doing for 20 years. They've been getting that education out there and spreading the awareness. And then because of the role that I'm in now, a lot of what we do in our Indigenous communities is we involve our youth. So I think for us, that's the next sort of steps we're going towards is getting that awareness piece out there for our younger generation. For me growing up, the main role in our lives was to respect our elders. So the truth is, growing up, I didn't really hear about elder abuse and or disrespecting our elders or harming our elders. That wasn't something that, I saw, and it certainly wasn't something that I would have practiced as a child or seen my aunties or uncles or our parents treating our elders that way. So I think it's a time to really get that information out there and and teach our young people with a kind heart. So with the response, we want to respond to these situations in a timely manner. So it's really getting the hubs together, having the discussions, bringing up those situations of members in the community, and really just diving into it and ensuring that that elder is safe and that they're thriving. And then the collaboration piece is just, as I'd mentioned, it's just a collection of service providers, natural supports, leaders from the communities coming together to support the elder and also the person causing the harm. And then supporting the elder with no judgment. We don't want to be judging them. We don't want to be telling them you shouldn't be doing that or they shouldn't be doing that. We want to be really kind and genuine with our responses to the elders who are experiencing these challenges, whether it's with elder abuse on its own or elder abuse and dementia. Just really being able to provide those resources for them to make them feel confident and empowered in their next steps moving forward. And accountability, as I mentioned, just ensuring that we're supporting the person causing harm. We don't know what it is that they're experiencing or what they've experienced in their past or why it is that they're doing this or they continue to do this. So it's educating that individual as well and involving them in those conversations and supporting them with whatever the next steps are for them so that they have a healthy family dynamic. And I think with this accountability, it's the healthy relationships with our children, which is a training that AF will provide in the future here. So I think just having that conversation and getting that awareness piece out there too, just ensuring that the person causing harm isn't alone and that we're there to support them as well. So the systemic improvements are the pathways and advocacy, including everybody, like I mentioned, including the person causing harm, our elders, their natural supports, RCMP, wellness programs, even just including culture and ceremony and talking circles and just making sure that we're being mindful of the culture as well and the traditions that our elders would follow and how that looks for them. And that's sort of where the difference comes in from our urban settings into the nation settings. It's if the elder follows those traditions, we really want to incorporate that into our CCRs with them. And then just the community safety, making sure we all have a part. We're all supporting the community, we're all supporting our elder, and we're all supporting the person causing harm. If we can't support the person causing harm, our elders are going to shut down and isolate themselves from having those conversations. So how our CCR support our case managers is streamlines communication and improves access to resources and reduces service gaps. So not only are we supporting the elder and the person causing harm, but we're supporting our case managers and supporting them from burning out. It's a hard role to play, and it's hard to not take that home with us. So we have these connections, we have this sort of holistic wraparound approach. We're supporting service providers, we're supporting our case managers, and we're supporting the individuals involved. It helps them to better navigate situation, ensures that individuals and families receive the most appropriate and timely support. And that's for example, our dementia, Alzheimer's Society with Calgary. If we're seeing that we have an elder experiencing elder abuse and having cognitive declines, we want to ensure that those supports are in place and that they, if that's where it is, that they're taking the lead on what the next steps are to support the elder. Communities benefit from having clear shared vision of their CCRs to ensure it's effective and grounded in local realities. So like I mentioned, each sort of community is different. So we have it is different in rural as opposed to Indigenous nations, and then also our urban nations. So our urban communities, sorry. And then I did talk about our Indigenous hubs. So as I mentioned, it's a different sort of approach. It's a more of a holistic approach. It's everyone together. So it's not just dealing with the elder and service providers. It's the whole family. It's the whole community. So strong CCRs are built on relationships. Like I mentioned, relationships are key. Natural connections are important. If we have an elder who's experiencing these alone, they're going to isolate. They're not necessarily going to want to talk to anybody about it. Oftentimes, if we see that an elder doesn't have those natural supports or those people in their life, they sort of just end up on the back burner and we don't know what's going on because they don't open up about it. They don't know who to go to talk about it. So they're experiencing this trauma and mistreatment alone in the darkness, and there's nobody there to support it. So the approach ensures safety and dignity for our elders and support for their families and culturally appropriate healing opportunities for those who have caused harm. So I had already mentioned that, but an example would be talking to the youth and that prevention piece. So being on the nations and going to the schools and teaching them and educating them, spreading that awareness so that they are moving forward and ensuring that, they are better, providers to our elders and that they are taking care of their elders. For myself, growing up on the reserve in Ontario, so I'm from Six Nations Reserve in Ontario, and we used to attend gatherings. So our elders gatherings, our nation is just along the Grand River. So we'd have this at Chiefswood Park. So there's this big giant open grass area, and some people may know where I'm talking about, but we used to have elders gatherings, and the elders would always talk to us about taking care of our youth. And that always stuck. And I remember being about 12 or 13 years old and hearing them always saying this. So the majority of my time in the work field has been with our youth. And so I've always taken care of our youth. And I'd always worked with young people who have had experiences with children's services, who have been in care, who have had that PTSD, who experience the ripple effects of residential schools. So while in my role as case manager with the youth, it's interesting now when I look back at it because I see how much abuse was happening with the elders that were involved in the young people that I worked with. And at the time I didn't see it as that. I just thought, our young people had challenges. They were struggling with addiction and mental health. But now when I look back, I feel like I wish there was more I could have done or that I should have done. Because oftentimes our young people were being taken care of by grandmas and grandpas and aunties and uncles. And so when I worked with the young people, I never just worked with them. I was working with them as a whole. So the whole family. And you can get burnt out doing that role. Because grandmas would be calling me or dads or moms or aunties and uncles. And, I'm trying to support the youth, but I'm also trying to be neutral in supporting the elders. And there were a lot of challenges there. And I feel like I wish I had known more, that I could have sort of steered those elders in a better direction, seeing that they were struggling with the young people that they were taking care of, who were struggling with drugs and mental health issues. So, with that being said, the whole, being a part of an Indigenous community myself and being told by our elders to take care of our youth, here I am now full circle. Now I get to be a voice for our elders, and an advocate for them. And so I am really enjoying what I do with this role because I feel like I've gone in the direction that my elders had guided me and our ancestors have guided me. So I just wanted to give that little personal note there. So why are CCRs needed later in life? So older adults face complex forms of abuse, so physical, financial neglect, or coercive control, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of what we are seeing that is a trend is the financial abuse. So it's how can we support them in ensuring that they are connected to the right people. And that's why the CCRs are so important, because not only are we directing them for elder abuse and dementia support, but we're also supporting them with those powers of attorney and how they can, how we can support them with the right people to talk about their wills, and what their assets are and who in their life are they safe with, who are their emergency contacts, and just really setting them up for success as far as their later years and how they're going to go into their, retirement or into, long-term care or having in-home supports, caregiver supports, and just making sure that they have the positive, healthy supports that they need to make sure that when they do go into the spirit world, that they are going to be okay and that their assets and properties are with people that they feel comfortable having that control over. Dementia can obscure disclosure or be misread as confusion. So we do have those stereotypes. We do think, they just don't understand us because they're getting older or they're old. And that's where ageism comes in. But it's really reading the signs and really trying to understand what it is that they're going through and how they're feeling. And when we don't work together, the older adults and our elders do get left behind. So elder abuse isn't visible when dementia is involved, and it can be even harder to recognize or report. If we're not working together across services, we risk missing signs and leaving our elders or our adults alone and isolated. And another thing is with rural communities, again, we have elders who have those natural supports, but when we think about rural communities, we think about the distance and the transportation and the travel and the services that are non-existent out there. So it's just trying to be really on board and recognizing those signs and seeing how we can support, even if it's just visiting them for coffee or having a conversation with them, just spending some time with them, being with them alone so that they can have those conversations in a safe space. So dementia and CCRs and what changes. So some things we might see with this is fear or agitation around people. This can be dismissed as confusion or mood changes instead of a sign of emotional abuse or coercion. Sudden changes in finances. They may be overlooked as forgetfulness rather than financial exploitation by a trusted person. Or statements like someone's taking my things might be seen as paranoia or memory loss rather than a clue of theft or manipulation. And then they might withdraw or be silent with cognitive decline rather than fear, shame, or trauma response. So an example might be an elder's change in mood and fearfulness are dismissed as dementia symptoms. So the CCR team makes a closer look, a coordinated review by dementia support staff and social services where elder supports reveals emotional abuse. A safety plan is a good step to supporting the elder and ensuring that they have all the resources in place to support that. Caregiver becomes overwhelmed and unintentionally neglects an elder with dementia. The CCR would activate respite services, caregiver support, and home care nursing. The goal is to protect the elder or older adults while supporting their caregivers to prevent burnout. An example of this, and I've used this many times, is my dad is getting older. He has some chronic illnesses and he is moving out here. And because of my role, I'm very mindful of how I am with him in the conversations, because he forgets a lot and he repeats himself a lot. And there's been times where I feel a little bit annoyed and I'm like, Dad, you've already mentioned that. Like, you already told me that. But then I have to stop and reflect and remember that my dad is aging, and some of these might be signs to support him better. And I know that him moving out here is going to be challenging, and there's going to be lots of change and adaptability. And I just think, because of my role, I'm able to sort of navigate those systems and reach out to the supports in my life and make sure that those supports are in place for him when he gets here. So the burnout is a big thing. And I don't even live with my dad yet, and I already can feel the heaviness of it. So it's just being really mindful of how we treat our loved ones, and as they age, that, they need to feel safe with us. So we need to be kind and be lighthearted with them. So what professionals need to know? Barriers rooted in ageism and ableism. So a service provider dismisses an elder's concern as just confusion because they have dementia. Or an older adult is excluded from safety planning because they're assumed not to understand what the conversation is about. We really want to respect their autonomy. So a person is moved to a care facility without being included in a conversation. Our elders still have a voice. They still have a say in how their life pans out and what their future looks like. So we need to remember that even if they are experiencing cognitive decline, we're still including them in those conversations. And then caregiver support. Family caregiver is overwhelmed and isolates and begins to neglect the elder's basic needs, not out of malice, but exhaustion. So like I mentioned, I haven't lived with my dad in many, many years, but I do know that there is an expectation when he gets here that I have to be very mindful of, and how I'm going to support that. And then cultural relevancy. So just being regular with visits and recognizing and understanding some of that decline that our elders facing dementia might be experiencing, but also making sure that they're in safe spaces and safe environments, that caregivers aren't being neglectful or abusive towards the elders. So with that all being said, I'm going to hand this over to Meaghan, and she's just going to go through a case study with you guys. So we have a brief sort of synopsis of the case study, and she's just going to go into depth with it for you guys. So thank you.
Thanks, April. So yeah, as you can see on your screen, you just have a short little synopsis about the case study, but I'll try and speak slowly because I know I can get a little quick with it, but I'll go through the whole scenario. And then as we get to the end, we'll talk about the 5 pieces of the CCR and how they can kind of respond to the scenario that I'm going to say now. So due to housing and income restraints, Jane, a woman in her early 70s, has stayed at the shelter for about 6 months. She enjoys conversation with other residents and staff and is often seen searching for private housing options and checking in on her finances and applications. Over time, staff begin noticing changes. Jane misplaces her phone and purse in common areas, loses her room key multiple times, and seems increasingly forgetful. Initially brushing it off by saying, "I guess I'm just getting forgetful," Jane soon begins accusing other clients of hiding or stealing her belongings. She becomes visibly distressed and insists someone is entering her room without permission. To ease tensions, staff offer strategies like keeping her key on a lanyard and storing personal items in a secure space. A few weeks later, Jane shares in case management that she's been forgetting to take her medication. Staff connect her with home care, and Jane agrees, appreciating the support. Later, staff notice Jane returns from one of her walks confused and dehydrated. She shares that she's become disoriented in the neighborhood, forgot to bring her phone or purse, and didn't know how to return. She says all the buildings look the same, and she had to rely on strangers to help her find her way back. Staff become concerned about Jane's cognitive well-being and meet her privately. Jane agrees to involve her adult son, Bob, who she describes as her go-to person or her safe individual. When staff connect with Bob, he expresses concern, but is defensive. He admits Jane has bounced several checks to him and that she has been giving him money regularly to help with his bills. He dismisses her financial struggles as she is beginning to be forgetful again. Over time, Jane shares with staff hesitantly that Bob's been pressuring her for money, calling her frequently, and even showing up unexpectedly to have her transfer funds. She doesn't want to get him in trouble, but she's scared and confused. Jane can no longer pay her own bills and is now behind on shelter contributions. She's worried, ashamed, and is now questioning whether Bob is taking advantage of her and her memory loss. So this story, though it has some facts involved, for the purposes of this scenario, is an urban Indigenous woman. So with this scenario, we're going to look at the response from a CCR supporting both the elder and the person causing harm. So just in the interest of time, I'm just going to be mindful of that, and I'll just move through the 5 approaches. So the first being prevention. So we'll be recognizing warning signs and acting early to reduce harm before it escalates. So as you can see through the scenario, the shelter staff did notice early indicators of memory loss, confusion, and emotional distress, which was misplacing her belongings, medication issues, and increased suspicion. So of course, we would have seen this over time. This wouldn't have been just like immediately. We would have noticed certain things as time went on because, as I said, for the scenario purposes, Jane had been with us for 6 months. So we were able to see sort of a baseline and see where things were changing. So in a culturally safe space and gentle engagement allowed Jane to express fear and confusion without shame. So oftentimes within the shelter, of course, we do have case management. They meet with their worker once a week, but if needed, we can include that safe person if there is one, but also just through our CCR and through our regular networks for Jane being an Indigenous woman, if she would like, we would include an elder or an Indigenous agency that might be able to best support her just culturally. And then staff are trained to recognize red flags, so specific to older adults and Indigenous clients, including the impacts of intergenerational trauma, isolation, and normalized mistreatment. April, if you don't have anything to add, I'm just going to move on to response. So the next step would be the response. So for the CCR, how we respond and how we best support Jane. So ensuring a coordinated and trauma and dementia informed plan, just as soon as we notice the red flags and as the concern comes through. So with Jane's consent, we utilize the CCR. In this scenario, the partners might include the shelter and elder abuse case manager. Throughout the scenario, as I said, we did include home care to support with the medication concerns. And then we would have contacted someone on our CCR that had knowledge of dementia or memory care. So Alzheimer's Society Calgary, we would have contacted them and gone through the process of how to start that conversation with Jane. Are you feeling like you're becoming more confused? How long has this been going on? Like, how are you feeling about what's happening and sort of the issues that we're noticing? And then because of the financial piece with Bob, we would probably include legal aid or public trustee, just trying to understand better how to support her with the suspected elder abuse, the financial piece. And then, as I said, the Indigenous navigator or cultural support worker. And then Jane discloses that her son, Bob, is pressuring her for money and misusing her trust, indicating that she's behind bills and is deeply conflicted about speaking up. So as April had said, right, when we look at elder abuse, especially like in the in the rural areas and where April is on the nation, they tend to include a larger family approach through the hubs. We're hoping that our CCR could get there and do more family work, but of course, there are barriers to that. But in this particular situation, we would really consider Bob as her son, and that's a family member, and that we don't want to create more shame or conflict about her speaking up about the suspected abuse. And then the next piece would be collaboration. So working together, including supporting the whole family, not just isolating the individuals, targeting the whole root of the issue, the family dynamics. So the CCR partners would collaborate to develop a plan that respects Jane's wishes to keep family ties intact. As we all know, elder abuse is very prevalent and it's on the rise. And I think that the last statistic I heard is that 1 in 10 experience. We know that to be quite higher, right? That's likely just those that are reporting elder abuse. And so we want to respect the person's wishes if they're not wishing to bring in law enforcement or pursue anything like that, because they want to keep the family intact. So we would support that and respect that as well. And if Bob agrees, a community-based restorative process can help rebuild trust while putting safeguards in place. So changing banking information, supporting Jane with memory care supports and resources, looking at independent living and does she need to be somewhere supportive. And then we would move into support. So supporting and includes emotional and cultural and relational safety. So Jane is reassured that she doesn't have to choose between safety and love. She's welcome to sort of navigate with her support workers a place where she can still maintain a relationship with her son, but keep safe financially and pursue that memory care. Emotional support helps her work through feelings of betrayal, grief, and hope. We utilize a lot of therapy, wellness, and things like that to try and help with the whole family approach and not just looking at the issue of elder abuse specifically. And then cultural support workers help explore intergenerational healing and how roles of caregiving are shifting as dementia progresses. So that might look like finding Jane a more supportive place to live. What we've noticed with memory care concerns and things like that is that it's a whole process to how to really be diagnosed with dementia. There are over 100 different dementias, and so it can be quite daunting. It's a lengthy process and includes a lot of doctor intervention to be properly diagnosed with dementia. And so what we've noticed in particular with like housing, independent senior housing, is that what you would need for somewhere like that would be a functional assessment, but because a lot of people don't necessarily have a family doctor that knows their whole history, oftentimes, we are seeing older adults be pushed through the system saying that they're functionally independent, that they can live on their own, they don't need certain supports, where when you've spent 6 months with someone like Jane, you would realize that actually, in fact, she does need these supports and how do we get them for her? And so that includes that whole coordinated community response, understanding that, we might be the professional in elder abuse, but we're not the professional in Alzheimer's. And so we need to bring them in. We might be professionals in elder abuse, but we're not with, some cultural, holistic approaches for Jane as an Indigenous woman. So we would bring in other networks and agencies and people with her consent and want, of course. So then accountability. So ensuring those causing harm are held accountable in a way that is safe, respectful, and allows room for healing, especially when the older adult wants to maintain connection. We see that a lot, right? Just with that whole reportable piece on elder abuse. We have a lot of people coming into the shelter and or calling our elder abuse resource line, which is a 24-hour staffed line, and saying, you know what, this is happening to me. I know this is elder abuse, but I'm not willing to report or get any legal representation involved. I just want to leave the situation. I just want to come and be somewhere safe. I want to come into the shelter and restart, rebuild, and just kind of get away. And we respect that. And then later on, when they're more settled in the community, of course, we offer that outreach support 1 year post-discharge, because we know that oftentimes maybe they're not going to go back to the person causing harm, but they do want that person in their life because it's, oftentimes an adult child or a grandchild And we don't want to close the door to that. So how do we do that safely and respectfully? So Jane expresses fear, but also deep love for her son, Bob. She doesn't want to get him in trouble. We see that a lot. But she does want the behavior to stop, just not the relationship. So then in regards to Bob, of course, as the CCR or the professionals on the case with the case management team, we would support Bob to understand dementia and the effects it has on his mother. Counseling or cultural supports to explore why he misused her funds. Invitations to family safety planning, if appropriate and safe. And then if Jane is in agreement, we would look at legal and financial tools. So a review of power of attorney to make sure that in the future she's safe financially. And, just trying to balance Jane's safety with her emotional needs. So April, if you want to just take over for reflection, I'm mindful of time here. I've got a little bit left.
Thanks, Meaghan. So our final reflections are that CCR succeed when relationships lead the way. Acknowledge the importance of listening with empathy and responding with genuine kindness, collaborating with humility, and recognizing that memory loss does not diminish a person's dignity, and that it gives our elders and older adults a voice, but it allows for their supports to speak up and advocate for each other and themselves. This includes everybody. This includes all walks of life, every culture, every background. I think in any culture that anybody comes from, we want to respect our elders and we want to make sure that they feel safe and that they're heard. And it's just being a voice for them if they are not able to speak up themselves. So I think that's our final reflection. And I thank everybody for being patient with me in the beginning there. So thank you so much.
No, thank you very much, April and Meaghan, for this great presentation and also for making the time and making yourself available emotionally after a very, very difficult news. So I really, truly appreciate you being here today. For those of you that are looking at the screen right now, this is the link to the Staying Safe booklet that was mentioned earlier. We linked to it in the chat box, but I'm going to pop the link again in there so that you can have a look. And in terms of questions, it's going to be a bit maybe broad, but I think it is of interest to a lot of people who maybe across the country are in different, and even abroad, are in at different stages of kind of working towards elder abuse prevention and intervention. And what would be the recommendations to kind of get something off the ground, like the coordinated community response models? Like, what are the first few steps that you would advise people to consider?
So April, if you don't mind, I'll just add something here. Like I said, when we were talking about the CCR in Calgary, it was quite small to begin with, but with the change of co-chairs and realizing the need in Calgary, I think that we really just networked. That was the biggest thing. And I think anywhere this model can work, because with networking, how many times as an agency professional are you contacting someone you met at a fair or an event or a symposium that you're like, this person can help me? It was actually really funny. At the shelter, there was a member of home care, an OT, occupational therapist, who came into the shelter, was buzzed in, and she was trying to go and see a client. And she asked me how to get to the main office area. So I was like, oh, I'll just ride up with you in the elevator. And then I started talking to her. Who are you? What's your role? What's happening? And she had told me that she was there to see a client for a certain need. But at the same time, I knew that I needed OT for my client who was in the community, and the wait list was so long, and she was struggling finding someone that she really kind of could trust because of a lot of sexual abuse in her past. She wasn't willing to let people into her home that she didn't know or trust or have a relationship with or a rapport. So it was really important that I had met her at this moment, because I was able to be like, can you just directly support me and my client, because these are the concerns, these are the needs, and it's been really difficult to find someone that she can trust. And since then, they have a relationship, a professional relationship together. They're working together on her needs. And it was just a really great, like, moment in time to meet this person who was just lovely. And so that's sort of how I think that I see the CCR is when you notice a need, you see a gap in services, just pick away at it, because we're all, like I said during the case study, we're not a professional know it all in everything. We know what we know, and we need to branch out to have other people that they are the experts in to help us support our clients. We can't be the expert of everything. So I think this model can work in a lot of places. And April, of course, has more information about that, but that's how I see it. It's purely networking and just building something. April?
Relationships again. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. The number one thing is relationships. So because I work directly with the nations, it's building that relationship before we even get to talk about what the CCRs look like or what hubs look like. Initially, we go in and explain who we are. So for myself, going into the nations, explaining who I am, where I'm from, what I do. Our initial sort of building is getting the elders together and just having a conversation about what is respecting our elders. Or, a colleague of mine had said a good question is, how does it feel to get older or to age? So we have these gatherings in a sharing circle, and the elders get to know me, because oftentimes when we're going onto the reserves or onto the nations, it can be challenging to build those relationships because you can be guarded and quiet, and people don't want to just openly express, yeah, there's elder abuse happening, or I'm an elder who's being abused. So it's just really getting that opportunity for myself to let them know who I am and to have these conversations. And then from there, we talk about what is elder abuse? What does it look like? And then discussions with service providers. And a lot of the nations I've been on have already have those hubs prior to me even coming out there. But it's needing that case manager to come in, or having a case manager on the nation to support with the elder abuse. To bring that to the table and have those conversations. So that's kind of where we start.
Thank you.
And Benedict, I saw in the question box just about, sorry if you were going to get to it, but I think it was a while ago during the presentation about the shelters in Canada. And then you had put up the infograph from 2022, which I use all the time in my presentations to really I use it all the time because I really think that it just highlights the need, like, nationally. So yes, Alberta has, the shelters. In Calgary, we have 14 beds. So that's huge when you consider, I think that some safe houses and shelters across Canada that deal specifically with elder abuse might only have a room or two, and they're constantly full. We are constantly full. And so, when I talk to family members and friends about the work that I do, I really try to highlight how important the shelter is, because it's not just a safe place for an older adult, it's an accessible place for an older adult. There's a lot of emergency shelters that will take seniors, but they're mats on the floor, they're about this thick, and good luck getting up and down if you have mobility issues or a walker. Many emergency shelters won't take people with oxygen because it's a hazard. So we really need an age-appropriate shelter to support our older adults fleeing abuse. And that's part of our mandate too, is that they have to actively be fleeing abuse. Imagine the seniors that are just, older adults in emergency shelters because they don't want to address the fact that they are being abused by a loved one. So it's very important to really highlight the need is so great. So I'm hoping that everyone takes a look at that infograph, because it's alarming to know that a lot of the shelters in Canada might only have one bed available and it's never open.
Yeah. And that is for the provinces or territories that have a place, and not everybody is in the same situation depending on where they live. So That was actually the topic of last year's
Yeah.
symposium for victims and
Yeah.
survivors of crime week. So we're keeping a thread going here. There was a
Yeah.
question, and I know I don't want to go over time because I would like to give people a little break before we resume with our next presentations. But there is a question about the funding for shelters, at least in Alberta, because it's different everywhere. But do you have can you provide a sense of how the shelters are funded, or how your shelter at least is funded? And someone who is looking to maybe instigate one somewhere, like what are the options?
Yeah, so we do have funding from obviously like donations and private fundings and things like that, but it's mostly from the government. But of course, the need is still so high that we're operating as best as we can operate, and so I think that's a struggle for everywhere. And I'd be curious to see how the other shelters are funded as well. But I know for us, we are mostly funded. We have a government contract and to fund our 14 beds, but of course, the need is always growing, and with the work that we do, we really like that holistic wraparound approach. We've seen shelters in the past where someone is admitted into the shelter, and the supports are available, but it's not quite as rigorous as ours, because we really focus on what are the needs to be successful so that you don't return. And how do we make sure that you're not returning to an abusive situation or homelessness or whatever might be the situation? So that's weekly case management. That's certain things that we really focus on that a lot of shelters may or may not do. I can't speak to them specifically, but we do see that in terms of services offered, it's huge. And the 1-year outreach, we just make sure that they're safe in the community, because it's not just a hello, goodbye relationship. We want to be attached for as long as they might need us. And so we've seen a tremendous success with that.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. On this note, I think we'll let you return to your activities. I know you have a lot to do. Thank you again so much for taking the time today and for being so generous with your knowledge. It is truly appreciated.